Hello horror fans, and welcome to another episode of Silver Screams. Tonight we are talking about Season 1 of Ash vs. the Evil Dead. The whole thing. We're going to give you a comprehensive season review, less of a play-by-play, and more of things that we liked, things that we didn't like, and things that we can maybe kind of speculate on for Season 2 a little bit.
If we're giving a comprehensive review, it's things happened, lots of people died. Sequel hook. That's it.
Pretty much. You want the long story short? Ash screwed up. That is how the series begins, and that is how it ends.
Tuesday.
Yeah, it's pretty much the long and short of it. But the series as a whole, before we get into that, I kind of want to give like a little brief on my personal experience with Evil Dead. I was introduced to the Evil Dead franchise going over to a friend's house. Her dad made me sit down and watch Army of Darkness, or made us sit down and watch Army of Darkness, and she had seen it before. I had absolutely no context for what it was. I sat there and I was like, huh? Most of the film, and I felt like I feel like I would get this more if I had seen whatever this was a sequel to, because I didn't know, but it was clearly a sequel because there was a recap in the first 30 seconds. So I watched that, and then and it wasn't until rewatching it again that I kind of gained an appreciation for, oh, it's intentionally campy. Like, I get it now. I understand, and that's when I started really appreciating it and enjoying it. And then years later, I saw the first Evil Dead after I graduated college, and it's just the worst, guys. I know I get a lot of flack for disliking it, but it is. It's just the worst, and it's terrible, and because I hated it so much, it took me years before I watched Evil Dead 2, and I'm glad somebody finally convinced me to watch it, because Evil Dead 2 is spectacular. It really is. So that's my experience with the franchise going into Ash vs. Evil Dead. You had a slightly different experience. Sort of. Sorry.
For those of you who don't know, I don't actually handle horror very well, which is why if we ever start getting into any of the harder horror movies, you will see her alone on the couch because I won't even watch them. Slashers I can live with, but a lot of the... So we had a very old computer that still somehow had a very good internet connection, and she goes, well, I'm gonna, buy Evil Dead on iTunes, so I'm gonna watch it on the computer. So I'm like, okay, cool. Leave the room, hang out in the living room for a couple hours, come back in, it's 1 in the morning. She's sound asleep, and the movie has only just finished downloading because it was an old computer, and I'm like, well, great. You gonna watch the movie?
My defense, I think I woke up a couple minutes before you came in, but yeah, I fell asleep while I was downloading.
Defense. You fell asleep on your bed, who'd have thought? But, so the movie started at about 1 in the morning, and it's dark outside, and the only noise is the occasional car passing by our apartment, and I didn't handle it super well. I was on my phone about half the time going, oh, the screen's covered in blood. Let's go back to the little candy game I got going. Believe it or not, before the advent of Candy Crush. Something else entirely. So that was my experience with the Evil Dead franchise, was watching Evil Dead 2 at 1 in the morning, getting done somewhere close to 3-ish, 3:30-ish, depending on how things went, and going, well, that was fun. Let's see if I can sleep tonight. And her going, I'm sorry. Wasn't it great? No.
But wasn't it great?
Not at the time.
Sorry.
So that was my first taste of it going, okay, we're not okay. So, and watching it again much later on during the day with other people in the living room helped a little more. Get a bit more of an appreciation for that. And then for Ash versus, like, I don't know if I'd be able to sit down and marathon this series, but in little half-hour chunks it was good. It was good.
Which, it's a shame because she actually hasn't seen Army of Darkness.
I haven't, but evidently they're not allowed to talk about it in this series, so I haven't missed much.
funny because even though they're not allowed to reference it directly outside of a few small nods here or there or very, very vague references of things, they're not allowed to talk about Army of Darkness in Ash vs. Evil Dead because of licensing issues, because Evil Dead 2 was made by one studio and then Army of Darkness was made by Universal. And it's a very interesting, like if you look at the Evil Dead films in terms of like progression, they're a very interesting story behind them because what, you know, the first one started off as a student film and it was surprisingly lucrative. And then for the second one, they actually got a budget and they did a much better movie and it became a cult hit, but lucrative, like in terms of monetarily speaking, they basically broke even. And then they got an actual studio, like a big studio, Universal, to back the final film. And it did the worst of all three of them, even though it will always, like, like Evil Dead 2 is the best of the trilogy, but Army of Darkness is special because it was the first one I ever saw, and it's more accessible because it's not straight up horror and it didn't have an R rating. So it's the most accessible one of the franchise too. The
higher the budget, the better you have to do to be considered a success, which is why we have so many issues nowadays with the $8 bazillion movies. And then, well, they didn't even, well, because you decided to remake The Lone Ranger and go as racist as possible. Did you really think that, did we really think this would be a success, you guys? But stuff like that.
Stuff like that. And so, because of licensing issues, and I'm going to go ahead and say off the bat, I really enjoyed season 1 of Ash vs. Evil Dead. I thought it was a hoot. I thought it was a holler. It was a ton of fun. And tone-wise, it actually is far more reminiscent of Army of Darkness than it is the other Evil Dead movies.
Until you get to the last couple episodes. And then it's like...
And then when they actually get back to the cabin, it is very Evil Dead 2 and even a little bit original Evil Dead, and does some things really well and does other things not as well. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with the criticisms of this season, and we are going to be talking about some spoilers. So
I would imagine if you're watching this video, you've seen the whole season.
Some people don't. Some people keep things vague. So it's always good to
watch it.
Go watch it because it's pretty great.
This is coming from me. Go watch it.
Yeah, if it comes from a person who doesn't like horror movies and yet is constantly reviewing MTV Scream.
I was gonna say, I think I've absolutely tanked my credibility on this show with that animation.
Oh, I should also probably, before we get onto the show proper, I also should probably vaguely mention the reboot, which I loved. I thought was really, really good for what it was, especially when it comes to remakes, because most remakes are not great, and this one was made with a love of where the franchise came from. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That's not, I didn't like everything about it, but I really, really liked the intent behind it, the passion behind it, and definitely the last 10 minutes was just amazing. And if you're an Evil Dead fan, the last 10 minutes of the movie are worth the entire trek. It's really great.
Staying with the pattern of I don't handle horror movies very well, I skipped it.
We will have to have you watch Army of Darkness because it's more fantasy than horror, and it's just the best. Anywho, to get on to the series proper, I'm going to start off with some criticisms. And probably my biggest criticism of the show is the fact that those licensing issues do make it very, very difficult to talk about Army of Darkness. And as a result, the series as a whole, plot-wise, leaves a lot of things really, really vague so that they can hold out to get the rights. And I know for a fact they're trying to work on it, but they're trying to hold out to get the rights to things so they can fill in those gaps with the things that fans love. But as it stands right now, it leaves audiences with a lot of questions going, well, wait, how did he actually get out of the cabin? What, because
he showed up in the book?
Yeah, he showed up in the book. There are a lot of very vague, nebulous things that may or may not have happened, and Evil Dead has always played very fast and loose with continuity, but in this series, especially for fans who like having things kind of spelled out, and references made and everything like that, it's very frustrating to see him go, oh yeah, I was at a cabin, this happened, and I survived, and I'm not saying another word about how I survived. I didn't go back in time.
Traumatized.
I didn't go back in time. That's what a crazy person would say. But it's just kind of frustrating.
Just cut our girlfriend's head off with a chainsaw.
We're not okay. But it's very frustrating as a fan of the series to have those gaps. And even if I wasn't a hardcore fan of the franchise, I would still be very confused in terms of like timelines and the way certain events plan out, and especially when it comes to what ultimately amounts to our antagonist of the season. I have so many unanswered questions.
It was interesting, but also just kind of like...
And there's a difference between like leave them wanting more and having a continuous mystery and everything like that, and just being unsatisfying in terms of what gets answered and what doesn't. And I get why, but it's still very frustrating as a viewer and a fan.
We were talking about that a few minutes ago with movie trailers, actually. Yeah. The difference between showing you virtually nothing but still leaving you intrigued, and showing you virtually nothing and leaving you going...
And leaving you confused!
I understand. Like the Cloverfield teaser trailer, if anyone remembers that, that's just the head of the Statue of Liberty skidding down the street.
I had so many questions.
It's like, it told you the least because it didn't even tell you the name of the movie. You just had 11808 at the end. But you wanted to know more.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
And it's that sort of thing. They weren't able to do a lot of that. We have a very obvious sequel hook at the end, but it's like, we're gonna get another series. I'm like, boy, that's really good because I have no idea what the heck is going on right now. Yeah. We have a dark one. What does that mean?
That's cool, I guess.
Don't know.
I will say that also kind of going off of that, my other biggest criticism of this season, and I have one more. I have one more big criticism after this one, is wasted potential. And what I kind of mean by that is that there are a few characters that are terribly underutilized, one of whom started off so promising, Amanda Fisher. She was such an interesting character, and they billed her at the very beginning of the season as much more important than she actually ended up being.
And then they open up the refrigerator door and go, step on in, this is where you stop.
And they shoved her in the fridge, which was exceedingly frustrating, and we've talked at length about this, not on the recording, in terms of there are so many other ways that that particular storyline could have been handled.
Real quick, for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of women in fridges, it comes from comics. Actually, Green Lantern, I believe it might have been Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern? Not entirely certain. But it started when a villain killed his girlfriend and shoved her in the fridge. And there was no point to this plot. It was just to make him feel bad. And so the idea of shoving someone in the fridge or fridging someone is this person died to make someone else sad. This person died to further their development or even just to give them emotion so the viewer will feel bad for them. This someone else's life was ended so we could have a little drama. And that's the long and short of that, and that is intensely frustrating because boy does it happen to women a lot. Yeah. I know there was a recent example where a man was shoved in a fridge and I was laughing my ass off, but I can't for the life of me remember what it was.
There's a good example of it in Transformers Prime, actually, because RC is our main character, and both of her partners get shoved in the
That might have been it. I think that might have been it. They fridged Tailgate. We know nothing about Tailgate, but...
Oh yeah, spoilers!
He's dead! Oh, come on, they mentioned it in like the first episode.
He dies in the first episode. It's pretty bad.
No, Tailgate.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Cliff Jumper. But yeah, Cliff Jumper died in the first episode, well, and Tailgate died before the series even started.
Well, Cliff Jumper was voiced by The Rock. You can only afford that for so long.
Expensive. Anywho.
But yeah, shoving someone in the fridge is killing them for the sole purpose of giving someone else emotions and or character development, but usually just pointless drama. She was fridged hard.
She was fridged.
And it was dumb.
Very, very hard. And I've spoken at length about how much I disliked that for numerous reasons. One, because she seemed to be a very interesting character up until she met up with the team and became a part of the team. And then it was like they didn't know what to do with her, so they made her Ash's love interest. And it felt very forced and out of place. And
in character, it would have been a day, a day or two,
and
maybe a week.
And I've heard a lot of people, you know, in terms of like some backlash against me saying these things, that she was fridged and things like that.
Yeah,
a lot of people were like, well, that's what Deadites do. They kill other people to torment other people. And that's what Deadites do. And this is what happens to Ash all the time. This is a vicious cycle. And I'm going to stop you right there, internet commenter, because and I'm going to say, yes, his girlfriend was killed in Evil Dead 1, 2?
1.5.
Linda was killed.
1.5.
Linda was killed, and then Sheila was turned into a deadite. So yes, this is something that happens to Ash, and it's left him very emotionally scarred and emotionally constipated in a lot of ways. But here's the thing. Just because it happened in a movie that came out 20 years ago, 30 years ago, doesn't mean that it's good to happen now.
Here's the other thing. Deadites do that in character, but there's a writer behind them. You can't sit there and go, oh, it's perfectly fine because it's in character for them to do. No, there was someone in real life making those decisions. It's like, well, this character dresses in a skimpy outfit because they're okay with it. Yeah, there was someone in real life who made that decision and designed it. You can't look at this and say, oh, it was in character for them to do, without going, okay, and what real life tropes and prejudices and social mores fed into that decision. You have to look at it on the meta level as well as the story level. You can't just take this and go, oh, they're Deadites, they do that. Congratulations, they're fictional.
Well, and it was and I say wasted opportunity, because in the way that she was killed, she was in the cabin by herself while Ash was dealing with his own emotional turmoil and demons, and it was a really good scene.
But they made it explicit that they were shoving her in the fridge.
They made it very, well, I'm talking about his portion of the
his
scene
was beautiful.
Was very, very well done, having to come to grips with his guilt and sorrow and mourning from the past. It was very, very well done. And she was in the cabin by herself. That was an opportunity they had to allow, because a Deadite wouldn't torture her to be like, oh, now killing you is going to make Ash so sad. No, because everybody's the protagonist in their own mind. Everybody's the main character in their own story. The Deadites wouldn't care if Ash wasn't there about taunting her in terms of saying, oh, we're going to kill you to make Ash feel bad. They would do it to make her feel bad. They would remind her about her failure to save her partner, about her failure to save civilians, about her inability to help her friends. But no, it was just, we knew you were a helpful person, and we gotta put a stop to that so that Ash can shed some man tears for a total of 2 minutes before he gets over it and hacks you to pieces.
They made it very, very explicit. Like I said, here's the fridge door, hop on in. And it just, oh, it was maddening. For one, as you pointed out, she's the only black character.
Yeah.
Way to be, you guys.
Only main character that was black. We did have some extras, which...
That's true.
Who probably also died, actually, now that I think about it.
That's extremely true.
But yeah, she's the only African-American main character in the show. We had a potential lesbian or bisexual subplot in terms of her relationship with Ruby that also got teased and didn't go anywhere. And also...
Well, Ruby also kind of turned out to be evil and functionally immortal, so that's a little weird.
And then that kind of subplot also didn't go anywhere, because when Amanda became a Deadite, and the Deadites clearly don't like Ruby even though she's a dark one, Ruby did nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. She didn't read from the Necronomicon. There was so much wasted potential, and it would have been so much more moving if Amanda had died at Ruby's hand, or had died trying to stop Ruby, or had lived, and now it's her lifelong mission to try to stop Ruby. There's so many other things that could have been done that were more interesting than killing her and making Ash feel bad about it for a total of 2 minutes before Pablo and Kelly came and he had to deal with evil Ash, or bad Ash.
Cue up Rolling in the Deep, because we could have had it all.
Yeah. And again, it didn't really make much sense from Ruby's perspective either, because seeing Amanda as a Deadite clearly affected her, but then when it's right in front of her, she also effectively does nothing, so that bit of drama or potential drama is also wasted. I don't want to harp on this too much more, because I could spend an entire hour talking about how frustrating that is and how stupid it is. But I also want to point out that the reason why it's so bad is because otherwise the series is really, really good. And so having something like that in the series, that egregious in the series is really terrible, because otherwise it's a pretty stellar first season. And okay, so my third big criticism, and then we can move on to the good unless you've got other stuff you want to gripe on, is the time constraint and the number of episodes. Because it was really weird having a 30-minute action, comedy, horror show going week to week. Maybe it'll be different if I binge it, but it was just really weird to only have a 30-minute show when I feel like there were certain things that could have been fleshed out. And granted, I don't want things to drag out either. There was one episode I felt like kind of dragged, but it was only one the militia one. I felt like that one didn't need to exist. But outside of that, the series didn't have a whole lot of filler, but at the same time, there's enough vagueness that I feel like a lot of things could have been fleshed out a little bit better, and I don't know if a longer runtime and or more episodes would have helped with that. So, but again, I know budgetary constraints has always been a factor when it comes to Evil Dead, so I get it. But for me, that was always my biggest complaint, was I want more, or I want more, like I want more in terms of, that was hilarious, why is it done already? Or in terms of, I want more character development, I want more discussion on this, I want more character interactions. There's a lot that I wanted more of. How about you? Any thoughts on the runtime? Did you like it as 30 minutes?
I did, and again, it has to do with my ability to handle certain things, so... Don't you even start. Well, yeah, I was disappointed that Ash's casual sexism and racism somehow made it into the actual writing.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that
not that they wrote him as sexist and racist, but that there were sexist and racist tropes at work, because again, we're frigid the black lady, because let's do that.
Yeah.
No.
They definitely played up his sexism and racism for laughs. Which, I mean...
And for one of those, pick which one of us is the real one. It's like, well, he's the wrong flavor of racist, so we knew it was you.
Good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun.
Okay.
So great. Anywho, but yeah, anytime they made Ash overtly racist, they always played it up for, or sexist, they always played it up for laughs like they did in Army of Darkness. But it's really sad when you actually see unintentional racism make it into the actual product. Or unintentional sexism as well. So it's like, let's sigh. Anywho, again, that's a discussion topic that we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about and pulling up examples for. And just as I think we've said before, misogyny in horror movies is like a huge thing that I would love to tackle one day, and yet I'm afraid. I'm afraid because there's a lot to unpack there.
Well, it also ties a lot into the whole sluts die, virgins live dichotomy / ideal, because that's not tied to the guys. The guys are jocks and nerds. The girls are either sluts or virgins. You don't really get to be either.
And a lot of times a lot of times women are the main characters of horror movies because they're the virgin or the smart brunette or something. I don't know. But a lot of times when men are the main characters in horror movies, they get to be the hero.
Yeah.
And you don't see the reverse as often. You don't get Ripley's every day, which is unfortunate because...
Or Sydney's.
Or Sydney's for that matter, yeah. And that's such a bummer. But anywho, again, discussion for another day. There's a lot going on there. Although we are getting a few... we are getting a potential primordial Ash in the form of Kelly. and she is just a delight. So I want to move on.
I love her.
I want to move on to the positives now, and I love the sense of humor that this series had. I loved that it mostly relied on practical effects and makeup, and that CGI was few and far between, and when it actually was implemented, it looked out of place. I'll let the little Lori stuff go, but like at one point there was a fully CGI Deadite and it exploded, and it just looked weird. Because the makeup is so good, especially with the demon from the Mindscape, Eligos.
Oh my god.
Eligos was beautiful, and I am so sad that we got so little of Deadites like that, because after seeing Eligos, I was like, holy cow, what's going to happen next? And then we didn't see Deadites like that until the finale, and even then it was just kids in creepy makeup.
Horrifying demon children.
Yeah, which they were creepy, but like nothing ended up touching how cool Eligos looked. It was just phenomenal, and in terms of like his abilities too, we had never seen a Deadite do anything like that.
Well, there's all sorts of stuff in the book that isn't just Deadites. I feel like Deadites are kind of the we are legion of this demonic pantheon's not the word I'm looking for.
Lexicon?
Like,
well, I guess the book would be a lexicon.
Strata, system, you know.
Totem pole, hierarchy.
Hierarchy.
There we go.
That's a good one. I feel like they're the bottom level. They're the pawns. And we maybe saw, remind me of the demon's name.
Eligos.
Eligos. Eligos may be a rook or even a bishop, but we haven't seen the queen yet.
Well, I think
using our chess metaphor here, it's like the king's great, whatever, the queen is the terrifying.
We might be able to assume that Ruby is the queen. Because
I'm just talking within the strata of Deadites. I assume the Dark Ones are the players on this chessboard.
They're the ones who, it was written by the Dark Ones, Necronomicon Ex Mortis, roughly translated, the Book of the Dead. And I could go on to recite the entire musical.
It has a face on it. You don't read from books that have faces on them. Like, how difficult is this? This is Surviving Horror 101. And I'll give Evil Dead 2 a pass because it was, oh hey, something's recorded. Interesting.
It was somebody else reading the book. It was a book on tape.
The book. It was, and that's really sad that he wound up in the middle of that because dude did not deserve it. But friggin', let me read you my poetry, you freaking idiot. Just, it has a face.
Conda. It was so funny. Yeah, no, Ash has never been the brightest bulb on the tree. And
yeah, but hot damn.
Yeah, no, that's a new level. And that was, I think a lot of people also had a problem with that. Like, given what he went through, a lot of people are like, that's out of character for him to, even while high or while drunk, to read from the book. He would never do that. But the point of it, I mean, we needed something to get the plot going, and I will allow Ash's stupidity to be the catalyst. I agree. I also think it's pretty dumb, but at the same time, it's also kind of funny.
I mean, I usually say this when I'm talking about Arrow, but it's the bad decision conga. Mm-hmm. You just kind of keep going and everyone joins in.
Mm. Well, the series, I will also say in terms of like pacing, the series got off to an amazing start. Kind of faltered a little bit in the middle in terms of, and not faltered isn't the right word, kind of
fell off a little.
It's not even the right word. The major missteps. The major missteps were at the very end. Like it kind of tripped at the finish line a little bit. And but it started off really strong, and I think Sam Raimi directing the pilot episode had a lot to do with that. Because the first episode definitely felt like I'm watching Ash from Army of Darkness 30 years later. He's still doing the same thing. He's still all about the physical comedy. There were so many things that felt like I was actually watching the next chapter of his story. And he does seem to be the type of person who wouldn't have any character development after 30 years. He would, but would still be completely full of himself. And so, I think in terms of the starting place, they got off to a really good start, and for the most part really did a great job of keeping that momentum.
The bit with Kelly's parents. with her mom coming back as a Deadite and pretending to be normal and just that awkward. The whole episode was really good.
Yeah, and if you go back and like rewatch it, there's a part when they're all at the table together and lightning strikes, and it's a very subtle thing, but when lightning strikes and the light flashes, at one point she's at one position at the table, and then, you know, it goes dark, and when the light comes back up, she's slightly closer to Ash. And it's something that you don't even pick up on the first time unless you're kind of looking for it. And it's like, that's very good. And the series also, in terms of like its horror elements, the comedy for most part was usually pretty on point. Yeah. There were a few jokes that were a little lackluster or a little tone deaf here or there, but the horror elements, whenever it wanted to be scary, it could be really scary. It could build up really good suspense, and it made me remember how it felt watching Evil Dead 2 for the first time.
For you.
In terms of like, there's a lot of really good atmospheric buildup, and the series did that really well, especially in that episode. And especially coming back to the cabin too. Whenever it wanted to be scary, it could be really scary and good. And you need that in a show like this. You need to have that yin and yang balance of the comedic, oh, I'm doing physical comedy and dropping light bulb, you know, things like that, and, you know, hitting myself in the face to try to get off this demonic doll. But then you also need the horror there to keep the stakes high and to keep the viewer invested.
I will say I loved Kelly versus the cabin.
Kelly versus the cabin.
Partially just for straight up callback, and partially because, and this is kind of what I'm sitting back and thinking about now. The whole thing with Amanda was, oh, we know who you are, or you're going to help him. Like, okay.
Did no one think about
Kelly? Is the one who's been kicking ass and taking it. She set it on fire. And the whole bit about the flamethrower. Pablo would be proud. Die! Like, and then
it's so funny because in the remake there is a bit where they do cause an explosion in the house, but the house is still standing by the end of it. It was just so gratifying to see the house actively try to keep her out of the fray because it recognizes that she's a threat, to actively try to keep her out of the fray and to have her response be, well, okay, I'm burning you to the ground, and I'm gonna yell, burn, baby, burn, as I watch it happen.
And then she goes back inside, and that to me was just a little...
Well, again, it let her back inside.
True, but I feel it's like, maybe the rain will put me out. Maybe something will happen. Maybe I can focus on beating this out. As long as you're not there, fine, get back in here. Just let me put the fire out.
Pretty much, like, it let her back in because it knew that if it kept her out, it was gonna burn. And that's way more than Ash ever did to try to fight the Deadites. And in a lot of ways, Kelly is a more heroic version of Ash. And yeah, this is a good part to kind of like move on to like side characters since we're talking about the good. We have a really, really good cast. And it's really good to pair Ash up with two people he can both mentor and to keep him in check as well. Yeah. To both kind of idolize him and pat him on the back, but at the same time smack him down when he needs to be smacked down. Because it's so
Pablo and Kelly respectively.
It's like a teeter-totter. Anytime he needs affirmation, Pablo's the one he turns to because Pablo just thinks El Jefe is the coolest thing. But anytime he wants somebody to give it to him straight, he turns to Kelly because she reminds him of a younger version of him, and because he loves himself so much, that's something he genuinely respects and responds to. And
that's why when she was possessed, it screwed everything up because she is the straight talker of the group.
It was, and again, it was, and the reason she got possessed in the first place is because she saved Pablo and Kelly. And it's also kind of fitting too that she got possessed, and it was the power of love, albeit from Pablo, that ended up saving her in the same way that Ash was able to save himself via the power of love when he was possessed all those years ago. So again, very fitting, a lot of really good parallels there. And again, I'm just really sad we didn't get more Ellie Gus, but going off of Kelly because she, again, was just fantastic this entire season. And Dana De Lorenzo did an absolutely fantastic job portraying that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was just so much fun. And you could tell that they were having fun too, even though they were like covered in like red syrup all day long. And apparently that stuff is really hard to get off. But I also want to talk about Pablo, because Pablo, when I was talking about how angry I was about how Amanda's storyline ended up wrapping up, I had one person comment that nobody says anything about Pablo like constantly getting emasculated. And it's like, let's talk about Pablo's character for a moment. His character, and the reason that Ray was actually even cast, is because Pablo is the type of person who is inherently truly good. He is a good person. That is his defining character trait. And Sam Raimi saw that in Ray, but just because he's good doesn't mean he hasn't been through a lot of things. He has been through quite a bit, and we get a little reference to that when in the first episode he mentions he came from Honduras, and even though that he's like, I thought you said you were from Jersey. Oh yeah, that's totally where I'm from. So you can tell this character, he's been through a lot just to get to where he is in life.
I mean, look at his uncle.
Yeah, his uncle's hanging out in the middle of the Michigan forest, just being a shaman.
And angry with Pablo for not pursuing something?
Not pursuing his shamanic profession. Weird.
Which we never got an explanation for that little medallion that he was wearing afterwards.
One of the many unanswered questions that I have.
Like, why did the face go for that? Why was it being pulled towards the Necronomicon? Is this an opposite subtract? Is this what is this? What is that?
What is this? Did the Necronomicon perceive him as a threat because of that pendant and thus decided, I need to take him out? Why? Anywho,
we just don't know.
Back to Pablo's character. He's a really good person, but has, as hashtag Pablo has seen some shit. And a lot of people, or mainly just one commenter, was like, why are you upset about Amanda when nobody says anything about Pablo getting emasculated? It's not Pablo getting emasculated. He doesn't. This is a kid who is in over his head, who is a genuinely good person dealing with a very, very cynical bunch of people. And granted, yes, he cares a lot about them, but they are cynical and jaded for so many different reasons. And even though he has seen some really horrible things and has gone through horrible things, he's never lost sight of his optimism and his good-natured spirit. And that's not being emasculated, being surrounded by cynical people. That is inner strength like nobody's business.
I'm trying to figure out what they would have even meant by that. Like, oh, he can't figure out what weapon he wants. Well, yeah, if you've had zero experience with weapons and all you know about are like action movies, of course you're going to be like, oh, flamethrower's going to be cool, oh, this is going to be cool, oh, that will be cool, with no idea of how it will practically work with you. Oh, well, he didn't get the girl. Yeah, he respects the fact that she didn't see him that way. Whether or not we end the series with that, how she feels, we just don't know. Yeah, that's obviously very murky right now.
I think that's mostly what they're referring to.
But her going no and him going, okay, and not continuing to pursue it, that's not emasculating. That is a good thing!
Well, and the other, I think it's two things. I think it's that, A, he's not immediately an action hero, which, no. Why would he be? Dana, I keep calling her Dana, but Kelly's not immediately an action hero too, but you get the notion that she got into a lot of fights when she was younger, and she had brothers who were in the military, or at least one brother in the military. So I have absolutely no trouble believing when she grabs a meat hammer and starts tenderizing a deadite. I have absolutely no problem believing that. But Pablo skidding across the floor trying to look cool, you know, getting off a really cool looking shot, but then being like, oh shoot, I didn't have a backup plan. That to me makes sense because he's a kid who is now in an action movie and he's really excited about that. But at the same time, it's like, you were in way over your head. That's not getting emasculated. That is like his character trait of like, this is his this is his hero's journey, essentially. This is both him and, because Ash has very room for character development because the way his character is what the fans like. Him admitting that he needs people is a really big step, but Pablo and Kelly are new to this, and they have arcs to undergo in order to be able to go toe-to-toe with the evil that Ash is accustomed to fighting.
Well, and Ash didn't get to be this big of a badass overnight either. It was, I can't vouch for Army of Darkness, but for Evil Dead 2, it was a matter of desperation.
It was a survival situation, yeah.
He spends the first hour of that movie getting his ass kicked by everything, including his own hand, which he winds up having to cut off, and it's a miracle the bleeding out didn't kill him.
Yeah, no, like, part of the reason he survives is because he goes insane.
Yeah. Desperation and a complete break from anything resembling reality were what got him through the rest of that night. So, I don't really want to see that happen to Pablo. I mean, that face thing was pretty dang bad.
Yeah, and the other thing about, in terms of Ash, was even though he became a quote-unquote badass in Evil Dead 2, he was still a coward in Army of Darkness. He's arrogant and full of himself, and yeah, he's very capable given that he survived this terrible situation, that he had to push himself in order to do that, to fight against the darkness, I guess. But when he was put in Army of Darkness and there were other people relying on him, he's still a coward. He doesn't care about anybody but himself because he's been through a horrible ordeal. He just wants to get out of there and go back to his normal life. He still wants to run away. And it's in Army of Darkness where he finally decides, I'm not going to run anymore. And it's the beginning of this series too, because we can't reference that, where he decides, I can't pretend this isn't a thing anymore. Pablo and Kelly are well on their way to being like that because they have him as a mentor figure, but I feel like no matter what, Pablo will always be that inherently good person, and nothing that happens to him will ever change that. And I think
a series like this that's full of snarkers and morally ambiguous people and all sorts of fun stuff, you need that. You need that neutral good going, yep, this is how we do it.
Yeah, not to mention, again, and I think that's actually going to come into play later on because he does have shamanic heritage, and I think that he will succeed where his uncle failed because of his inherent goodness.
They've also got the dagger.
No, yeah, that's true.
Wasn't he keeping that for insurance?
Kept it for insurance.
The dagger.
So,
and the end of the series did see him making the choice to run away.
Yeah, and
take them with him. Like, come on, kids, take my dagger.
Whereas, let's compare the two. Ash's solution to the problem of, and granted, at this point he does want to save his friends, but his solution to the problem is picking up everything and running away. Whereas Pablo's solution to the immediate problem of Pablo being possessed was to cut his own head off. He was willing to give up his life to prevent from hurting other people. Ash would have never done that for anyone, even probably Linda. I don't think he ever would have done that just because that's not who he is. His survival instinct is too strong. He doesn't have that, and maybe that's where the series is ultimately going, is Ash getting to that point because he has Pablo as an example. I don't know. But Pablo, again, that's just who he is. And anybody who wants to complain about that or say that is weakness, you are wrong, and shame on you. And if you want to just base that whole emasculating thing on just the character dynamic he has with Kelly, there are unrequited love situations all the time.
This is an unrequited love situation where the guy's not being a creep about it.
Yeah,
Do you know how refreshing that is? That is so nice. Let's show someone being a decent human being about the situation for once, because everything else is, oh, he's stalking that girl. He must be in love. It's so romanticized. She should say yes. Whereas from her point of view, it's, he's stalking me.
Yeah.
This is
And at absolutely no point do I ever feel like Pablo is being a nice guy, quote unquote. He's just genuinely being a good person.
Yeah.
He had, and in terms of, and so you both empathize with him for being in love with somebody who doesn't love him back in that way, but at no point do you ever resent Kelly for only thinking of him as a little brother. Yeah. And who knows, that character dynamic might shift or change, but if we want...
We've had inklings of that with... He has a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Which, I feel bad for Heather. I saw a review of the season finale, I think it was on Nerdist, that pointed this out, that she was severely underutilized and you knew she was cannon fodder from the get-go. The series did not make you care about her. Like, the second those hikers came up, you immediately go, oh, they're all dead.
You know they're cannon fodder.
Which is par for the course for Evil Dead, but they kept her around long enough that it's like, who knows, maybe she'll make it out the other side. But they didn't do enough to be like, care about this person before we break her leg, drop a sofa on her, and occasionally tear her to pieces and throw her out the door. Like,
after also sticking her with a bunch of nails. Ooh.
Like, they tried, but it was the cursory, oh, it's funny because they're newlyweds and she's the third wheel. Oh, it's funny because she never wanted to go hiking, but she did anyway. Oh, it's funny because she wants to hit that as far as Pablo goes, and Kelly is being protective, possessive, we're not sure which. Oh, it's funny. Like, no. Make me give a flying damn about this.
In fact, it's actually for all of those reasons that I feel really bad for poor Heather. Like, she, and I knew that she was going to die, but they kept her around long enough that I was like, maybe they'll invert the trope. And that she'll randomly be alive and no one but Pablo will care. Like, I thought that would be kind of fun.
They tortured her so badly that after a point it was just like...
Well, I empathize with her for being the third wheel because I've totally been there. Not in a hiking situation,
no.
Of course. That's asking for it. But I've totally been there. And then in terms of the, I'm not even supposed to be here today, I thought that was really funny. And her being like, me too, right? Like you want to keep me alive too.
Yeah, sure.
It very much reminded me of that Galaxy Quest scene.
The red shirt.
And then, what's my name? And then also the College Humor did a sketch about Jurassic Park where they actually got the guy who played the lawyer to come back to have him go, I'm only here to die, aren't I? No.
Basically it. So yeah, if they wanted any of those scenes, any of her getting tortured at that point, because it was really bad, to have impact with the audience aside from, ooh, we kind of knew this was coming, but that's still pretty rough, they needed to make us give a damn and a half about her as a person. And they did a lot of little cursory, it's funny, they've got so many eyes, but they didn't really... and so you're just watching this girl get tortured and going, can we maybe not torture the girl? If you're going to kill her, just do it. Decrease the surplus population.
I mean, I'm kind of, again, I'm bummed that they didn't invert the trope because I think it would have been hilarious if she got out of there.
She's so clueless. It would have been great.
It would have been so funny. You know, because she's like, I'm not even supposed to be here today. I think it would have been really funny if they had actually let her live. But I also would have been really upset if they killed Amanda and then the next new person they add to their group is a white person.
That's true.
I would have been very, very angry with that quick turnaround. That would have been like worse than what Walking Dead does in terms of its revolving door.
If they'd pulled a Walking Dead and gotten another black person almost immediately to replace the one they kill, because let's face it, guys, Walking Dead does this. That they have a quota. They kill a black person and then within an episode or two.
Well, I'm not going to pretend like it's just Walking Dead that has that part, that has that problem. Apparently,
Walking Dead is just notable.
Apparently, in Hollywood, if you have more than 3 people who are black on a show, it is considered a black show. Which, what the hell are you smoking? Anywho, that's a discussion for an entirely different day. Again, we'll have that heading racism in horror movies, and that'll be a fun topic to try to unpack. Anywho, now that we've talked about Pablo and Kelly, I want to talk about our main antagonist of this season, and that's Ruby. Because for the longest time, it's an easy prediction early on to assume that she's the professor's daughter / Annie's sister.
Well, she says as much.
Yeah, and she says as much a couple episodes in, but when you see her early on, you're like, I bet she's related to Annie. And that's why she has a personal stake in this. That's why she blames Ash for all this. This is why she's trying to find him. And then she says as much. But it's not until...
I never quite bought that. Because
it seems like a convenient.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, that is way too convenient. And then she found the hand, and then this, and then I just know
like that's all very convenient.
But that's not what you're really doing.
And then over the course of the season, we find out that the Deadites refer to her as a traitor, and that the others will never let her get the book. And after an explosion, she freaking phoenixed herself back, you know, like without a scratch, still looking gorgeous, mind you, and is able to fly in and save the day from Deadites whenever she feels like it. Save the day, quote unquote. And then we find out that she's one of the Dark Ones, one of the others, I suppose. So that whole line makes me feel like she's not the only Dark One left around. That there are at least a few of them still left around, if not all of the quote unquote Dark Ones who wrote the Necronomicon.
Well, if they can phoenix like that, then hey, why not?
Well, and again, this is where I have a lot of problems with the way the series the season wrapped up, is because we know so little about Ruby as a Dark One. We can infer that she's not the only one left, but have they all been forced to take human form? And they've all just been lying low since Ash went back in time? Again, all of this has been kept very, very vague for the sake of licensing stuff, and that's so frustrating because there's so much I want from her character, because right now it's just, the world's a mess and I just need to rule it.
That's pretty much it.
And because her whole motivation is, as she tells it to Ash, is just to contain all of the evil, to release it, but make it so that it's under her control, so that she's the gatekeeper and or godfather of the evil forces running around on Earth, which I kind of get the whole I want to take over the world thing from a very juvenile little kid perspective. Like when I was a kid, I never questioned when a bad guy wanted to rule the world. But as an adult, I'm like, what do you plan on doing? Like, when you take over the world, you clearly don't, because she says she wants humanity to flourish because there can't be any evil without good.
So what's your tax policy?
Yeah, what's your tax policy? And that's from George R.R. Martin. He's like, Aragorn's a great, warrior, but would he have been a great king? He's an interesting character, but I don't think he would have been a great king. In terms of, like, what was his tax policy? So that's what I always kind of think of when somebody says they want to take over the world or they want to overrun the world with demons or whatever. It's like,
and then what?
Why? It's like, when you take over the world, you're gonna be bored. Like,
and then what?
When you get your throne, what are you hoping to accomplish? Because you've essentially set yourself an eternity of twiddling your thumbs. If you actually care about the world, quote unquote, and you actively want to manage things to make the quote unquote world a better place as you see it, then I kind of get it, because you're setting yourself a career path for the rest of your life and making quote unquote the world a better place. You're giving yourself purpose and progress and goals.
It's Dr. Horrible's career path.
But like, for me, when it's just like, I just want to take over the world, it's like, that's confusing to me. Because you're just wanting power for the sake of power. You're going to be bored sitting on your throne twiddling your thumbs. Like, torturing humans is going to get old. I don't get it. So I'm really wondering what her motivation is, because clearly she hasn't given Ash the whole story when she offers him the reset button, quote unquote. And I'm hoping we get more than that, because the biggest sin this season has committed is giving us a potential plot thread and then not following through. And I don't want that for all of these questions that I have for Ruby. I want to, first of all, say Lucy Lawless's performance, fantastic. That doesn't change the fact that I still have so many questions.
You did really well. Now, what?
For everything outside of your control, huh? And And I'm wondering if maybe Ruby is just, if she was exiled from the Dark Ones and this is her way of trying to get revenge, to be like, well, I'll take over everything now and I'll make things better.
Or if she's the last one somehow.
I doubt that because they said the others, and I'm assuming she could very well be the last Dark One around. And I'm wondering if they're all laying low, if they're all dormant, if Ash reading the book all those years ago caused them to awaken, or I just have no idea. Or if they've all like just been hanging out at bars, driving around in Mustangs, like just being cool. Is that what Dark Ones do in their downtime? They go and get cars and wear nice clothes and just look cool for people? I don't get it.
Time to release the Deadites and destroy humanity. I was just getting used to the fashion of this one.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if maybe she's locked in human form because of X, Y, or Z reason, or if that's just the form she could take to be incognito, or if like that's how a Dark One looks, but they still have access to, you know, unfathomable amounts of power. I have just so many questions. And again, the whole, because she was billed as being Ruby, not necessarily the bad guy, but an antagonist in terms of her pursuit of Ash, and we had a Thelma and Louise plot with her and Amanda that went nowhere, even though they were teasing a potential lesbian relationship, which again amounted to nothing. It was just there to tease us. So I have a lot of questions about Ruby, about whether or not she has the capacity to care about people, whether or not like she genuinely believes that like what she's doing is for the best, or if this is just all mwahahaha, I'm evil now for reasons. I don't know. I have a lot of questions. But again, long story short, I loved her. I liked her, especially as Lucy Lawless. I feel like I'm grasping at things that may or may not be there when I ask these questions.
Well, this is kind of why we're leaning on the sequel, though. Like, hopefully by the time they start writing the sequel, like you said, they can get some rights, they can fill in some plot holes, and they can talk about some stuff. I'd be surprised if we get 0 answers, but I think even if they don't get the rights to Army of Darkness, that we will get to know more.
They'll find a way of working around it if they don't get the rights, and I'm fully confident in that. But I'm also really hoping that all the hard work that, you know, the people who are working on the show in terms of trying to get the rights, because I know that Bruce Campbell himself is like going down to Universal to try to negotiate these. This is something very important to him.
I'm just imagining, hey buddy, let's talk.
Like, so it's something that they're actively trying to do, and that Bruce Campbell himself is, you know, going out personally to try to get these rights. They're working very, very hard on it, and I'm hoping that all of that hard work pays off. Universal, loosen up. Come on, this can only be good for you. But if it doesn't, I'm also fully confident that they'll go, okay, well, we gotta work around it, and that they'll figure out a way to work around it.
Yeah.
If
we should probably wrap fairly
we should. This ended up being a lot longer than I intended.
No, it is a full series recap.
It is a full series. We'll do better about condensing these moving forward, but anywho, final thoughts on the series. I thought it was a hell of a ride. I thought it was a lot of fun. And it's very rare that we get horror comedy series on television these days. I think the only other one that's on right now is Z Nation.
Oh, yeah.
Z Nation. Scream Queens is kind of in a nebulous area right now because we don't know if we'll get a second season. So I'm pretty sure
it was an extant horror comedy. Yeah. I actually wouldn't put MTV's Scream as a horror comedy because it was just kind of like...
I still liked it. I feel a lot more positive about it, I think, than you do a couple months down the line.
It's alright, but it just pales in comparison. They try...
To this, absolutely, everything pales in comparison
well, to this, to Z Nation, to Scream Queens. An attempt was made, but they're going to try and continue the story with the post-murder skeleton cast that they've got. So it's like...
It'll be interesting to see where that show goes. And again... Scream Queens, MTV Scream, and Z Nation we get and with Ash versus the Evil Dead, this is, I feel like, the most that has been on television ever. And 2015 is a great year for television horror comedies. I can't think of very many other seasons. I think people would probably make an argument for Supernatural or other shows like that.
Supernatural's a drama.
But it has, like, funny episodes? I don't know.
It's a drama.
But anywho, there aren't very many series that try to do what Evil Dead, or Ash vs. Evil Dead has done. And that's awesome. And the fact that, like, it's finally happening for fans is also just something that is a marvel to behold.
When are they going to make more Evil Dead? When are you going to make more Evil Dead?
Yeah, after the remake came out, there was a lot of talk about an Army of Darkness sequel, and that never came, but we got this instead. And this is stellar, and I'm so happy that this is what we have and that we already have another season to look forward to. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this is coming from a non-horror fan, guys. That's awesome. I will sit you down to watch Army of Darkness. Anywho, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We want to know, what did you guys think of Ash vs. Evil Dead for the first season? There's a lot to talk about. You can tell us about what characters you liked and didn't like. And we also want to hear from you, what other movies / television series or episodes of television series would you like to hear about? Because we'd love to talk about them.
Yeah.
There's going to be more Goosebumps coming eventually. Because it just makes me so happy.
Because it's fun and ridiculous.
It's fun and ridiculous, a lot like this show. Katie, any other final thoughts on the series before we wrap up?
Again, they left it very open-ended, so I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going with that.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Guys, Valentine's Day episodes of horror or supernatural shows, because we're kind of getting into that season now, so I'm sure they exist. I know they exist. Do the thing.
Oh boy. That'll be fun.
I'm sure Buffy has at least one.
Speaking of, Lucy Lawless has a background in musical theater. Guys, I think we need an Ash versus Evil Dead musical, because there's already an Evil Dead musical, and if they gave us an episode or 2 or 4 or 5, I would totally be okay with that. Anywho. Katie Cullen, where can people go if they want to find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram at Kiaxet. That's Kiaxet.
Any upcoming projects or anything that you're working on that people can look out for?
Please.
I'm Megan. You guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TheMenguin. That's TheMenguin. Also be sure to follow Silver Screams on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Silver_Screams for Twitter and Instagram, and just, I think, Silver Screams on Facebook. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us for however long we've been talking. It's been a while. A while now.
10509.
Whoops. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you all next time.